Today, I'm going to rank every Red Dead Redemption 2 town in a tier list, starting from the worst towns and going all the way up to the best towns. The towns I'm going to be ranking are anyone that's kind of classified as a town by the Red Dead Redemption 2 wiki. Starting off in 10th place, we got Lagras. It's kind of a cool town. It's involved in that one mission with the gators and like Jules, and I don't really remember the boat guy's name, but the boat guy. They're kind of cool, and I feel like the whole vibe of the town is kind of interesting, but it isn't really a town. There's only like the bait shop in town for the legendary fish, and I feel like there's not really that much going on in Lagras. It's not really a town. There's not like a general store or anything like that. And it's not really that important to the story at all besides those couple missions and like getting into Bronte's mansion, where like it's cool that you have to go there to do that, but there's nothing like in the town that actually wants you to come back after that. I feel like I never explored it again and again after the fact, and it was just kind of like a one and done thing when I went to the mission for there, and then when I had to get new bait for my catching all the legendary fish. Armadillo is in 9th place here. I feel like Armadillo is kind of interesting. It's right in the middle of New Austin, and there are a couple cool things about it, but clearly in Red Dead Redemption 2, it's not as popping as it is a couple years down the line in Red Dead Redemption 1, just because they're dealing with the cholera outbreak. There's no like lawman missions, or like you're kind of the only lawman in the town, so it's kind of like Van Horn in that way where you can get away with a lot of stuff, but there's not really much going on. Like there's Herbert Moon and the Strange Man and all those connections, which are kind of interesting to look into, but there's not much like gameplay wise to go on in Armadillo. And I'd say both Armadillo and Tumbleweed, there's not much going on because there's only one mission that actually takes place in New Austin, and just overall New Austin isn't really a part of Red Dead Redemption 2 at all. So this one is also going in D with Lagras. In 8th place, I have Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed is pretty much the same as Armadillo. There's not a lot of content going on there, but at least Tumbleweed has a couple more things. Like Sheriff Freeman is pretty cool. He's like super hard on the outlaws, and there are 2 different bounties there that you can do. But I feel like, again, there's not that much to do in Tumbleweed, and it doesn't really take part in the main story, whereas like most of the other towns on here at least take part in the main story, and there's at least some cool things there. I mean, there is like a saloon and a general store and whatever, but there's not really that much going on in Tumbleweed, so I have to put it pretty far down here, 8th place, also in the D tier with the other 2. In 7th place, I have Van Horn. I don't know if you really want to call Van Horn a town, but I definitely say it is. It's a pretty large settlement, and Van Horn's kind of interesting because there are no lawmen there, and kind of if you get into a fight, everyone attacks you, so that's kind of cool, and there's like some interesting dynamics going on in Van Horn, but I think in Red Dead Redemption 2, it doesn't really take that big of a role. Like it is in Red Dead Redemption when Arthur goes to find Abigail, and like there's some cool parts of that, but there's really 2 main missions that happen there, and they're both in the 6th chapter, and I feel like the one with Bill isn't that interesting, and then there's the stranger mission there, which is kind of cool. I think Van Horn is pretty cool on its own, but it's nothing really special to me, and that's why it can't really go any higher than C tier, and I think it's going to definitely be in the bottom of C tier. In 6th place, we have Annesburg. I feel like Annesburg is kind of interesting. Like it does play a very big role in Chapter 6 with like Mrs. Downs, Meredith, when you have to bring her back, and then when they shoot Leviticus Cornwall. But I feel like there's not that much that I'd really say is that interesting. Like it's just kind of a big oil and like coal town, and there's like some cool port parts, and you can like take some boats out of there and steal them. But I feel like there's really not that much going on. And it's kind of just a gray and dreary town. Like it's not like fun to hang out in Annesburg, and I'm not out there just getting like going to the general store and stuff in Annesburg because I feel like it's kind of lame there. I don't know. It's not a very fun place to be, and I feel like it also fits in C tier with Van Horn. It's just kind of this gray and dreary place that I don't want to be at a lot. In 5th place, I have Blackwater. I feel like Blackwater is pretty interesting. Like it doesn't really play a big role in Red Dead Redemption 2, but it does play a big role because like that's the whole Blackwater heist, and like John does settle in West Elizabeth at the end of the game, so it does play a big part, but I feel like there's not like a big main part of it. Like there are some bounty hunting missions that happen there, but I feel like Blackwater at least is kind of a cool town. Like I spent a lot of time in there when I was playing as John. And I feel like there's a ton of missions that happen there. Like you go to Sadie and stuff, and you meet Uncle there. And while it doesn't really play a big role in any of those missions, I feel like it is kind of cool. And I feel like it's at least like kind of an interesting town to be in. And I mean, I feel like I spent a lot of time there. So I do like Blackwater maybe more than some of other people. Just playing as John, you just get to, I just would mess around in the town and just shoot people and stuff, and they'd get mad at me. And it's like I feel like it's a pretty fun town though. Next up in fourth place, also in B tier, we have Strawberry. I feel like Strawberry is kind of an overrated town for me. Some people say that Strawberry is like a really cool town. And I feel like the setting of Strawberry is really cool, but it doesn't play like a big role at all in the story. And I don't really feel myself going back to Strawberry a lot. Like there is one debt mission, you go there, like breaking Micah out of jail. And there's a couple times like in the epilogue when you do go to see Strawberry again, but I just don't think it's that fun of a place to be, and I don't really spend a lot of time there. While there's that one cool mission with Skinny's kid where you like rescue his dog, and there's a couple other like interesting things in Strawberry, I feel like it's not a place that I go back to a lot, and it's not a place where I just like mess around and hang out, because it's kind of like a weird town. Like there's the river running through it, which I think is beautiful, but it's like it makes the town a lot harder to get around. And I don't know, I just feel like it's not that important in the story where I'd have to put it higher than B tier. In third place, also in B tier, I have Rhodes. Rhodes is a pretty cool city to me. I feel like there's a lot going on there, especially in the third chapter. And I feel like throughout the game, Rhodes is kind of like an interesting place. It's kind of right in the middle of the map, like at least on the eastern side, where if you're trying to go down to Saint Denis, you kind of go through Rhodes, or if you're trying to go from Saint Denis to Valentine, you go through Rhodes. Like it's a nice place where I feel like a lot of stuff happens and you spend a lot of time down there, especially with two of your camps being right around there. Like there's a lot of time you spend in Rhodes, and I feel like that's the place I was just using trains the most. But there's not like, it's not that cool besides that. Like Pearson is pretty cool. Like in the epilogue, he took over the general store there. And then you have the gunsmith, like the guy hiding in the cellar there, which is also pretty cool. But there's not really that much besides that I'd be like, okay, Rhodes is a cool town. It also has a really ugly look. Like I hate the red clay soil. And I just feel like Rhodes isn't a place where I'd be like, oh, I need to go back to Rhodes all the time. Like Rhodes is cool, and I definitely would visit it a lot just because it's a place that's really involved in the story. But I feel like it's more story. The story part is cooler than the actual like Rhodes itself as a city. And I feel like it's mostly because of the dispute between the Greys and Braithwaites that really carries Rhodes to being so popular. In second place, the only one in A tier, I have to have Saint Denis. There's so much stuff going on here, and I feel like Saint Denis has to be probably, I mean, it's the only city in here, and it's probably the coolest town, in my opinion. There's a lot of stuff that goes down here with like Angelo Bronte robbing the bank, robbing the trolley station, and Como Driscoll's hanging. So there's a lot that goes down here, and I'd say the majority of the stranger missions actually go down here, where it's like bright bouncing boys, the one where you catch all the animals, and a lot of the other ones, they all start here and then they go other places, or they're just involved in a lot of actual missions, which I feel like is pretty cool. And I think just the whole like city aspect of it is also interesting. There's like the vampire, there's the guy who is really racist to people, and I feel like there's a lot of interesting things in Saint Denis that you're not going to find on your first look there. And I feel like every day I just find a new thing. Like I found Trelawney's family there, and there's just always something new that you find in Saint Denis. And while I don't think it's like as cool of a city as our number one choice, I feel like it does really work in the overall amounts of the story and really relating to the death of the West. Like Saint Denis is the reason why the West is dying, and it's a really big city, and it's kind of, the only one with actual police there. And I feel like just everything in Saint Denis is pretty cool, especially with like the bounties and the one where you can try the electric chair. I feel like every mission in Saint Denis is really cool, and they built it out really well. So it's like, it doesn't seem at all like the rest of this Western game. It seems like a whole different thing. And I feel like because they did a ton of other things and they added a ton of things to Saint Denis, I feel like it's a really big town that really works in the span of the game. And I think that's why Saint Denis has to be my second choice. It's really fun to be there, and there's just a lot of stuff to do there, and you can just spend time hanging out in Saint Denis, like shooting people and doing other stuff and doing fun stuff. and you're always going to find something new, or at least you can spend a lot of time here and still find new things. And last up in first place, I feel like everyone knows the first place one, Valentine. I feel like Valentine has to be most people's favorites just because it is involved in chapter 2 and it's like the main town in chapter 2, and it has a really like middle location in the rest of the game. So you're always going to like kind of pass through it, or you could pass through it in a lot of situations. So it does play a really big role, of course, in chapter 2. You also do get to rob the bank in chapter 3, and I feel like just everything that happens in Valentine is kind of like interesting. Like you get to do the fight off against Leviticus Cornwall, and just you get to do the Lenny mission, and a lot of it's just like this nice camaraderie from chapter 2, where I feel like chapter 2 is like the time you feel the best. You're like, oh my god, this is such a fun game. And then the rest of it's more like, wow, this is a fun game, but there's like a deeper part of the game. And I feel like Valentine kind of represents the childhood, while the rest of the game kind of represents the adulthood, where it's just like you're getting into the game, you're just having the time of your life doing all these fun missions and like kind of learning about the game in Valentine. And I still think Valentine is just a cool area in general. Just being in the middle of the map and being like a true Western town really works towards it. You also have like a couple other interesting things. Like you do have the show there, and you can like duel people. And then there's like the two serial killers. There's the prostitute serial killer, and then there's the regular serial killer, who are kind of both in the same area. And I feel like there's just a lot of interesting events that also happen in Valentine. And I feel like a part of that is just due to it being in the middle of the map. There's also like the thing with the O'Driscolls. They have the poker racket. I don't know. I feel like a lot of stuff really goes into actually them making Valentine. I feel like it really represents the West in the entire game really well. But let's go over all the towns. You got Lagras in 10th place in the D tier. Armadillo in 9th place in the D tier as well. Tumbleweed in 8th place, also in the D tier. Van Horn in 7th place in the C tier. Annesburg in 6th place in the C tier. Blackwater in 5th place in the C tier, Strawberry in 4th place in the C tier, Rhodes in 3rd place in the C tier, Saint Denis, those are all in the B tier, Blackwater, Strawberry, Rhodes, all in the B tier, Saint Denis in 2nd place in the A tier, Valentine in 1st place in the S tier.